Okay. For the last video, we were able to derive a bit more information about the members that are contained inside of this class constructor, which is what we determined a derived class. It's got a base class that it is deriving from, and it's got a nested class that it points to at this offset. This offset right here. We also created the virtual table pointer that allows us to have a better view and a better understanding for some of the virtual function calls that's happening here. So for instance, this one is doing a count based on whatever the random number that's being passed in. This one is calling the switch statement, and it is switching on the value of the random number ANDed with FFFF. So if we continue here, this is getting a random number, so print random number, or I'm sorry, random number. This is printing our counter times random number. This one, you can see it is simply printing 1337. There's not a get there, so this is going to be a public data type that it is able to directly get without having to call a get function. This one is going to be calling and printing out the string hello. This one is going to be calling and printing out the string this is only a test. And this is being assigned to the hello character pointer that we saw back here, hello from derived, and it's going to iterate through and basically use a C-type naming, or a C-type a C-type print character array routine. So what this actually is a character pointer like that. Yeah, so it the initial place that this is going to point is the very first character, and it's going to print out each character, incrementing it by 1 here until it gets to the null termination. So down here we are printing out the hash sub string that we saw from nest. So if we go to nest here, we have these substrings that was being derived from this string. So that looks like it about does it for this particular one. Here, down here, we have a call to the deconstructor, which we don't really care about. But it looks like past this, we're setting up a new object. So we have a new allocation here, which is being called into a or passed into a constructor, most likely. And then we have a number of virtual function calls that looks eerily similar to what's happening up here, right? So let's dive down into this and see what's happening. As we can see, we have some stuff already filled out here, our base and our nest. So this is essentially exactly what we saw earlier, where we have the derived object getting set up right here. If we look at this one, very similar stuff, right? However, the difference is that these values, that's going to end up being the hello, random number, and counter, are different, right? This one's 42, where that one's 0. So this will be another derived class. Maybe if we click on this string, yeah, so hello from derived, exactly as before. So what we can do here is, it's not a base, but we know it's a this call, and we'll do an auto class create. Go ahead and pull it up in our editor, and we're just going to call this rename to derived _1. So there you go. So I'm not going to go through. I think you kind of got the idea from the previous video on how to finish this, but basically it's the same concept. You're going to go through and create a virtual table here, and as you can see that this virtual table for this derived class is different from the other virtual table. It actually looks like some of these didn't get created, where Ghidra didn't recognize that these were functions. So what you do is you basically double click on them, you hit F, as you can see, here's our get random number that we saw earlier, and this is going to be our get random number. This counter is different though, right? So earlier we were passing in the random number that was being passed into the function that was calling the constructors. In this case, we are just whatever the random number is, we're just incrementing that. In this case, the random number is what we called random number last time. This guy is actually being statically set here. So that's a bit different. So what I meant earlier by when you sometimes name stuff and you later realize that whatever you named it is not the correct thing, this is a classic example of that. The reason being is, so we know that this base class has 4 virtual function calls in it, right? And over here in our derived virtual table, we know that the first one is a count, the second one is a get offset, the third one is a get offset, and the fourth one is a switch statement. So the difference is how these are actually implemented in whatever class is inheriting these virtual function calls. Now, here in derived, I called, actually I've got it right here, I called this a random number. The reason why I done that was in this count function, it's basically, if you do analysis on this, it's basically being set to whatever the random number was. So it's going to be incremented one by one until this counter equals the random number. So whenever this do while loop exits, the random number, or the this value is going to equal our random number value. However, if we look in the derived 1, it's still inheriting from this base. So it's still, this is still a count, what I called a count function. However, it's implemented differently. In this case, whatever the value is, it's only incrementing it by 1, right? It's being statically assigned here to 42. So whenever this is called the first time, it'll be 42 hets plus 1, so it'll be 43 hets. If this called a second time, it'll be incremented by another one. So it's still counting. So this is still a counter function. But this number is not random. So in this video we talked about, we finished up you know, making this look neater. In this video we discussed how to, you know, complete this object and the function calls that's associated with it. That way it looks a bit nicer on the disassembly or the decompilation here. And we started in on this this second derived class that's being, or object that's being set up down here. I'll leave this for you to finish for yourself if you feel like doing that. But we're going to move on. So now we can call this. So what this is doing, there's a couple of ways that you can set up an object. One of them is this type of deal where you're allocating memory space to it, and in this case the object is a pointer, so create object with pointer. We'll just call it that, and then we'll go back to main, and in the next video we'll dive down into the next function and see what it's doing.